I'm Nita Sanger. I want to express my gratitude to the Institute for Digital Transformation for providing me with this opportunity to host the digital dialogue, Reimagining Retail Banking. At Idea Innovate, we work with services businesses in financial, professional, and legal services, helping them to accelerate growth and maximize returns for companies, and also working with investors to help them uh, grow their businesses. Today, we were going to talk about retail banking. Till recently, retail banking was a fairly straightforward business with customers making transactions at branch offices, storing valuables in safe deposit boxes, and going to their local bank managers to get any advice. But today, that's no longer the case. Customers' needs are changing, and now we're starting to see a little bit of a bifurcation, which is taking place just based on different generations. The older generations still value the touch that you have where you actually go in and meet with the bank, whereas the younger generation just prefers to do most of their work online. And so as a result of this, some of the large banks have made a lot of investments in technology and to provide their clients with digital convenience. However, getting lost in this is the customer experience. Many times customers feel that they've just become like a little bit of a commodity, and which is where we believe that this provides a huge opportunity for mid-sized and community banks that are closest to their customers, who are and who basically are very close to the communities that they serve. And that gives them the ability to get unique insights into the needs of those customers, sort of help bridge the digital gap and actually become, trusted advisors for their clients. But a lot of times the smaller banks face a number of challenges on what they need to do to transform their business. So what I wanted to actually we were going to do is we're bringing together a panel who's going to be helping us sort of walk through this. So we have people with experience at community banks. We've got people who do investments in financial services, in financial services, and experts in business transformation for the banking industry. So with that, I would like to introduce Amy Werner, who's our community bank expert. Hi, Amy. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Nita. Good morning, Nita. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me on this panel.
Amy, would you mind just giving me a little bit of your background before we bring our next panelists in, so our audience can sort of, understand what background you have?
Certainly. So I've been in community banking for about 30 years. I've worked for institutions as small as 500 million to where I currently work for a $2.1 billion bank right outside of Boston. I've always worked for mutual bank institutions. I've worked in the retail area as well as marketing, human resources, small business lending, and community relations.
Excellent. And then our next panelist is 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶𝗶, who I worked with in the past when we were both at Deloitte. And 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶 now has been doing a lot of transformation work, not just in Canada, in the US, and globally. Welcome to the podcast, 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶. Would love to sort of get a little bit of your introduction.
Hey, Nita, great to see you. Amy and I are neighbors, so this is always fun, even though we're doing this remotely. I run Winton Place, which is a consulting and business advisory and coaching firm. Like you said, I went with Deloitte twice, running their global innovation practice, and also I was a VP at TD Bank, running their large-scale digital transformation, one of the very earliest digital transformations. And I've done transformation for companies globally around the world, small, medium to large.
Excellent. And then our last panelist, but certainly not the least, is Dion Lyle. Hi, Dion. Thank you for agreeing to speak with us.
Hi, Nita. Great to see you again. So I come from the background of investment, basically corporate ventures. So I was early in City Ventures. And anyone who knows City Ventures today, I'll say I was version 1.0. They're a very sophisticated shop today. So I was early on. I was also First Data Ventures and more recently Huntington Bank Ventures. And in between all that, I actually consulted for community banks in digital transformation, mainly focused around B2B SMB platforms.
Excellent. Excellent. So with that, let's get started. So Amy, since you have been in community banking for so many years, can you sort of talk to us and, how have you seen customers' needs evolve, and just based on how it's different across generations, and what are banks doing to address that?
Sure. So, I think today's customer wants the best of both worlds. They want seamless technology where they can do self-service on their banking time, on their schedule. But they also want the background of being able to have somebody. People are important. People are the key to community banking, to banking in general. They want a sage advisor to help them. So whether they're using it on a daily basis, a monthly basis, quarterly basis, or maybe even annually, knowing in the back of their head that there is someone there for them is really important. But they are looking for sort of the latest and the greatest digital tools that help them do what they need to do to keep their finances in order. And I see that sort of, across the generations. A lot of times, especially in community banking, people bank with you based on referral. And that's because you have each generation of customer that say, well, that's my bank. That's always been my bank. And that's really the crux of how community banks sort of work. They're supporting the communities in which they serve and work well to have multi-generations customers. In our case, when maybe budgets are constrained and we're not able to make large investments in a certain technology, we're able to partner with national partnerships. So for example, we're a construction bank. We partner with Built, which is a wonderful online tool that helps our builders ask for more money. So we can, they can upload pictures of where they are with a project instead of us sending someone out on the ground to look at things, and we can forward their funds to them. We've just recently partnered with Greenlight, the national sort of financial services for young children, where there's built-in app and technology there. So sort of leveraging those types of things. And then we've also, partnered with Z Suite to help with escrow accounts and landlord-tenant accounts and that sort of thing. So, community banks are just in it for technology just as much as the big guys. And we can do that by leveraging partnerships with national partners.
Great. Dion, when we had spoken, you had mentioned that the needs of the small and mid-sized businesses are, they're changing, and what their needs from their local banks are changing. So it'd be great, what do you think their needs are, and then how can the community banks actually address those changing needs?
Well, building on what Amy said, I think it's a matter of the iPhoneification of business, right? Everyone used to accept Excel. It's easy. We get it. It's ugly. There's no UX. But now business people are looking for that UX experience, which didn't used to be the case. What I told community banks I worked with was, listen, you're all about the handshake. I get it. Bob walks in from his local dealership, shakes your hand, does his deposit. That's a great old school model. Love it. But that's changing. And what I try to do is get them to balance that old school handshake with Bob, the auto dealer, with a digital platform, what I call concierge service. So it's the digital handhold, but also the actual literal handshake. To Amy's point, banking's still personal. People like to have a banker, and SMB, local business owners, are more prone to that than even consumers. I know a lot, myself included. I don't want to go into a bank. I don't want to talk to a banker. Oh, God forbid I go into a bank, right? If I'm in a bank, I did something really bad, or I'm about to buy something really big. But either way, I don't care about the banker. I want the best digital platform. The shift, Nita, honestly, is now businesses are thinking this exact same way. I worked with a bank that did a digital lending platform. Bad news. They forgot to tell anyone they did it, right? So one thing I'll emphasize for all our banker friends out there, if you invest in these great partnerships and platforms, tell somebody, right? Do some marketing around it, right? Don't just put it out there and expect the world to beat a path to your door. So for SMB, it really is much like consumer. Digital plus personal, concierge, as I call it, that's what people are looking for.
Right. So, 𝗗𝗶, now, since given your background, it would be good to sort of hear from you. What challenges do the leaders within these banks face as they're trying to address the changing needs of customers and their employees? Because as we know, banking is a very traditional business, and it's kind of hard to get them to sort of think about innovation to do things differently. So, what would you sort of, give us your thoughts on this? What should they be doing to address the challenges?
I think, actually, Amy touched a bunch of it with the ecosystem and partnerships, but the other thing that is key is mindset. I think sometimes financial services gets a bad shake with words like risk adverse and staid and old. I think it's really important to educate the customer and our people on really it's taking care of things because, having been inside a bank, and in a big consulting firm, I've had the chance to walk the halls as both an employee and a consultant, which makes a big difference. When you're not risk adverse as much as you're protecting, you have trust, you are a good corporate citizen through regulatory environment. However, at the board, the language can be created that is innovation, from the board to the leadership to the employees. So they're all speaking the same language and they get excited about it. So from a language and a lexicon perspective, it's really a key mindset. One of the things we do with our clients right early on is educate, and create a innovation language that the employees learn and it matters without feeling like we're breaking things. Because also innovation gets a bad rap. Break things, fail fast. Nina, we did it with audit and taxing people around the world, very conservative. And really, when people understand that it's really, I used to say, nobody's going to fail fast, you'll get fired, right? And so we have to, you can experiment. And we also have to change the HR way of rewarding people, because a lot of people who get into innovation teams find out their career's kind of been derailed instead of promoted, because there's not a career path for them. So they're not rewarded when they come back in. So if we do innovation on the side and too far outside of the core, then it gets rejected. The other thing is cross-functional teams. I mean, Amy's background, I was just like, I get giddy and excited when people have so many different hats, like when she said marketing, HR, things. So she's a perfect example of somebody. We need to bring cross-functional teams. The first thing I do is usually bring regulatory, privacy, compliance, and marketing, and HR, and IT, and infrastructure all have to be together at the table. Otherwise, you're not going to innovate well. You're just, something somewhere along the line will get rejected. And I think, and this is, I think, really small and community and credit unions, they're actually better suited in many ways than a large, huge global company, of which I've worked with both, to get things done, as long as the leadership and the board is also aligned. Otherwise, I think employees feel like they're just pushing a car uphill and they'll go work for us or something.
Nina, can I build on something 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶𝗶 just said? I was dealing with community banks, and one of the things I found, I did a Google search of community bank boards. Full disclosure, male, pale, and stale. 72-year-old white guys who golf together. I was like, this doesn't represent their customers. How are these people doing exactly to 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶𝗶's point? How are they going to approve a $200,000, let alone $1 million digital transformation? They're air quoting digital. They're quoting their grandchildren. They're like, the disconnect between the board and the banks that want to move is pretty big. So I always tell startups, look at the board of directors. Is this a group that's going to approve something?
And so I agree with you. So, and 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶, what you actually said was leadership sets the tone at the top, but then you need to create the structure and the incentives that are there to actually help the people within the firm innovate, because nobody wants to actually get fired.
With education and the language they trust. I've worked with some, in fact, who said construction? I mean, I've worked with construction, legacy banks, legacy publishing companies, and then there's a lot of what you described at the board level. There has to be a safe environment for which the board can learn as well, because these are people who have been paid to be experts their whole lives. And they have been paid to protect their employees and protect their clients. So it's very important to work and create a safe environment for leadership to learn while we bring employees in. And that's worked very well. So by the time we innovate, the leaderships aren't saying, what are they doing out there? What are they bringing today?
And I just sort of add on to that. I think boards, you will have buy-in when there's data. If you're supporting data through either, what's best practices out there, what are some KPIs, how can we sort of measure this, and then customer feedback. So whether you're providing, hey, this has been something that this product has been asked for by our customer base, such and such bank, on the national level has provided, how can't we? So, and I also think the environment's different now. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions that are happening, especially in the community bank landscape. So, I think that the pale, stale, and male is going to be changing for a lot of community bank institutions.
I think we're starting to see it, Amy. I think you're right.
And so what you just said is actually what we call co-creation, because clients are telling you what they need. So you work with them to create something. And then the second thing, what you mentioned was, it's almost like what we call quick wins. So you get some results and people see the benefits and they're like, oh, this is actually working. And so then they want to give you more money to go sort of do more things, because if it's already, it's like, it creates like a very positive sort of environment where as a success breeds more success. Sorry, go ahead.
I think the one last thing is when Amy touched on partnerships, interesting, but get out of the bank. Look at industries. I often take senior leaders into industries that aren't their own, because from a neurological perspective, when it comes to innovation, if you've spent your whole career being an expert or something, it's very hard to open up to an art of possibility because you're so trained to think a different way. So when I take leaders into B2C organizations or pharmaceutical organizations, or what are other industries doing on the AI and tech front, you can easily port it into your own industry and make it work for you. And sometimes it's easier to understand and you get a more open reception than if it's in your own industry.
Our organization, our whole executive team participates in GAP International, which is out of Philadelphia. And it's the whole idea of breakthrough thinking and how can you not put obstacles sort of in your way. So this is one example of how organizations can sort of break out of that norm and sort of that, banking language that they speak, by monthly getting in touch with other innovators, other industries, other people who are at the C-level, and how they're making changes in their organization, and then just not putting obstacles in the way. It's breakthrough.
So this is something that we've done in the past in a lot of services businesses, is basically what we call almost like a design thinking workshop, where, and you can call it by different names. What we do is where we bring together people, like you take on leadership and you make it cross-functional leadership, and you bring them into in an environment where they are there like for a short period of time, and you get them to think outside the box and say, hey, if you had to think about like 5 years from now, what would this look like? Or if Google was to run a community bank, what would they do? So it's like thinking outside the box, where you're sort of pushing your thinking and saying, and what adds to what you said, 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶, from some other industry who's known to be doing customer service at scale really well, or like Netflix, what would they do if they were to run a community bank? So it actually pushes people to think in a different way, bringing in also AI experts and sort of saying, here are the capabilities that exist. That's what we found has actually worked. And I'm sure you remember when we did this in the past, where we brought in people with different mindsets. It actually helps you come to an answer that you might not think about when you're just sitting within the bank.
Yeah, I think I've hosted bankers out here. I'm in Silicon Valley, and you can have one of two things. They open their eyes, or it's just a version of what we call the petting zoo. They come out, we take them to Google, we take them to Apple. They say, hey, nice, this is great. They get back to their bank and do all the same things again. The key, and I think, Amy, you hit on it, change their thinking. 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶, you made the same point. Change their thinking, change their lens, change their language. I love your emphasis on language, 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶, because I build myself as the Rosetta Stone between innovation and institutions. And the fact is, I used to say legacy. A banker ripped me for using the term legacy. He's like, we're not legacy. And I'm like, okay, whatever, sure. And then they go into we're just a tech company with a bank license. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, you don't have the R&D budget. You don't act that way. You don't have product managers. So I love the language thing, and slowly getting these bankers to use that language and own that language and integrate it into their world. That's the Rosetta Stone crossover that I think every bank and every tech company needs.
So Amy, would love to hear, how is like your bank balancing the need for digital transformation and knowing that there's, funding constraints that they face, while maintaining the human touch? That's where the difference lies. And sort of what are some of the challenges that you're facing?
Sure. So I think, no matter whether we're on a chat, whether we're doing a text to banking, or whether we're in person or on the phone, again, 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶 and Dion's discussion about language, it's that we're all saying the same thing on all of those channels. So, I call it the Village Bank experience because that's the name of my bank. And I need to be able to provide that touch point at all different experiences. So whether you come into my branch, you call me on the phone, or you chat through our chat feature, you're getting that same feeling, which is our brand brand, and which is authentic. And so that's number one, because this is a trust business. You know, as much as there is with technology, we still need to build trust with our customers that they're going to know that that's the bank I want to do my business with. You know, as we sort of started this off, is banking becoming a commodity, or is it based on that relationship? And I would say that, again, the people are the important piece. People follow their loan officer. People follow their branch manager. People follow the people that they trust has their best interest, no matter what bank they're in and whatever size that is. So I see that time and time again. You know, on the technology front, for example, we're the number one beta tester for any new technology. We started this conversation to talk about that we are sort of stuck with our core. You know, banks stuck with their core technology that they have as their base. That's their foundation. Now, that's not to say that they can't partner with fintechs, they can't leverage outside opportunities, but becoming sort of a beta tester for what's the latest and greatest that your core is providing allows you to provide the best for your customer that might be out there. I already talked about having partnerships, and I mentioned 3 that we have. There's many other that are out there. The other piece is sort of these like banking lab spaces, and they're popping up around the countries, where it allows community banks to have economies of scale by beta testing and checking out new technologies that might be out there, or new fintechs that want to partner with banks and need to sort of get over maybe those regulatory hurdles, compliance hurdles, to do that. So, you know, I think standardizing the messaging is important. I think we're also going to see more and more AI popping in, and that's where the personalization comes in. You know, no matter what size bank you are, as a customer, you want to feel important. And if my bank is tailoring messaging using AI or using technologies to put in my hand, on my phone, in front of me, what I think I might need, that's going to be more and more. And I think that's going to be commonplace along banks of all sizes.
So this is great. So one of the things you said is, and which is kind of gets lost because everyone is so excited about AI, that at the end of the day, it's not about the technology, it's about people. And I think people want to be recognized. Like you said, customers, they want somebody who kind of, it's almost like you want to go where somebody knows your name. So at the end of the day, it's about people. If people get so caught up in the technology that sometimes you tend to miss that. And then the other part, which you said, which actually was very interesting, is this whole thing about like having a place where you can experiment, which is, so in fact, I remember like many years ago, like Singapore, they actually had where they created like an innovation lab where they would bring in banks. And because Singapore, it's easy to do because it's a small country. And then the Singapore government actually ran this innovation lab where they would bring in banks and startups where you could actually go in a safe space and experiment. Because experimentation, to do it away from land, that's what 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶𝗶 had kind of said, do it within a safe environment so you can experiment, test things out before you bring them into the bank. So I think this is also a very important thing. And I don't think we have enough of that actually happening here. 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶𝗶, do you want to add anything to that? Sorry.
Singapore is a great example. Singapore is a great example. Their regulator used to host a Friday drinks for people. That's the kind of thing you want to see where the ecosystem, and that's the one point I'd really want to build on. It's the ecosystem. And Amy, sounds like your bank does a great job there. You have your core, you work with them, you have these digital innovators, you work with them, focus on your customers, and you wrap it all together in an experience. That's ideally what all these banks should do. It's not separate channels. It's just that omni-channel. Everything feels like your brand. I think that's brilliant, Amy. I'm glad to hear a bank doing that.
But I think we're an outlier. I
assure you are.
As an industry, that's not necessarily always the case.
Correct. Sadly.
But it's moving that thinking. It's moving that thinking forward, and having thoughtful conversations like today are all about that.
But even core providers are getting better and better, whereas they used to be so locked down. They had no innovation. Their tech stack was outdated. And even that's gotten better. And I think the cores have a long way to go. And I've seen actual mergers, acquisitions get blocked because they had 2 separate cores and they wouldn't meld on the contract. And they blocked an actual merger of 2 banks, right? So let's not let the cores off the hook too easily here. They can be a good partner, but they have a long ways to go, in my opinion.
So 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶𝗶, do you want to talk a little bit about experimentation? Because I know we did a lot of that when we were trying to innovate. What left
I think I really love what Amy had to say about we can't forget the core. So I launched, as you know, both when I was with the bank and when I was with Deloitte, some of the first labs, and I'm talking like 10 years ago. And we also would bring it into the US second, because we can't ignore the decentralization of the American banking system. The regulatory environment's a bit different, and it's a huge market. And in this day and age, if something goes bust, it gets out fast. So experimentation is really key, but it's also key as long as people from the legacy side are included. And part of that is helpful. I've found experimentation works. Sometimes I've often said, find your co-op, your youngest employees, and find the couple people who are just about to retire. Put them in the room for experimentation, because then you don't lose the ideation. We had, it was a different industry, but it was construction, where we were trying to save miners underground because you can't test people for alcohol and drugs and you spend your whole time underground, and they lose them to this day. This was like 6 or 7 years ago, but we brought old miners. We flew them down from way northern mines, and we put them with a top university like the MIT of Canada, and we put them in an experimentation lab, and they came up with life-saving IoT gear and smart fabric that could save lives. I don't think that would have happened with the kids on their own. I would say the kids, or without the really crusty old miner who said, hey, just so you know what the reality is like. And that to me is a beautiful thing. And we don't allow that to happen enough. We discard the power of generational, cross-generational thinking and experimentation. And so when you bring it back in, and the other thing to be important is to prevent tissue, what I call tissue rejection, because it's not as simple as just plopping it in. And, you know, a lot of these core, I've done a lot of M&A, a lot of that happens because the work hasn't been done to even understand the differences between the core. So by the time you get to that part, the people who could have been speaking real early on weren't even invited to the table. So I think there's a lot of learnings we can do.
Got it. So Dion, you know, usually we always say transformation happens when there's a burning platform for change. And banking, we've been hearing that, oh, things are going to transform, they're going to change. But the reality is community banks are sort of still profitable. So how can we get the banks to actually say, here's an opportunity? Because I've always found that has the opportunity to significantly grow the business. Can you guys hear me? I'm hearing some echo.
There's an echo. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
Yeah. Okay. So
I get your question, Nita, and it's a good one. I really think about as I look at either core, whatever the change you need to make is. I always go back to something I learned from the 11FS crew. If you've ever worked with them, JTBD, jobs to be done. Just step back and say, okay, somebody wants to deposit a check. That's the job to be done. That person doesn't care if that money moves ACH, RTP, FedNow. They don't care. Make it transparent, right? And I'm sure, Amy, your bank, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep all that tech behind the scenes. If you focus on your customers, if you focus on jobs to be done, you will likely do the right thing. Now, that requires conversations. When I was at Huntington, we interviewed, God, it must have been 60, 70 of our small business clients. Do you know how many said they want to worry about banking and accounting? 0, right? No small business owner wants to. I run a donut shop. I want to make better donuts. I don't care how my money moves. I just need payroll to sweep over to the right account and all of that stuff. So I would say any banker, and this is true in any business, focus on the jobs to be done and really break it down to the customer's view of that. That will drive all your innovation in the right direction, whether it's digital or just better process. And by the way, let's not ignore process. I was having this debate with someone the other day, Nita, about we keep telling, and I'm guilty of this, all of us consultants, advisors are, banking's going to change. You're in trouble. We've been saying this shit for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
The fact is, today, I think it's actually true. I think AI is shifting the ground in technology and beneath us in ways that we had not seen before. So I think the next 5 years are going to be more dramatic change in banking and all industry than the last 25.
Okay. And why? What do you say? It's only the technology that's driving that, or
it's AI? I mean, like I have kids in their 20s. I don't even know what to tell them about their career path because All the banks now, large banks, my son works for SVB, loves his job, great job, but they're not hiring analysts or entry-level people anymore. I just read Google got rid of the entry-level product managers. Google, right? So because they're like, oh, I'll just chat GPT that. I think AI's power is overstated. I think it's abused, but I think it can be great, and it's going to shift the ground. And I think employment is the first place we're seeing this, but it's going to permeate everything. Wealth advisory. Now there are wealth advisors, just chat GPT it, tell it all your data, and it'll come back with recommendations, right? That takes the person out. I think that's a mistake, but I do think it's shifting everything at a bank. Number of employees, all of that.
Okay. And so if the banks at this point of times go like, yeah, we're doing good, we are making money, so they don't feel that, because that's the thing to get them to move, where do you think this is going to end up?
Well, what was Blockbuster's last profitable quarter? It wasn't as far back as we think, right? Everyone does well until they don't, right? How did you go bankrupt? Slowly at first, right? You know, the famous quote. All of this happens slowly, and then suddenly overnight, everything's different. And I would just encourage banks to do as Amy's institution has done. Start with digital interactions. Engage the ecosystem. There's a great ecosystem. Google wants to meet these people. Apple's happy to host them. You know, get out there, change your perspective, and you've all made the point. Don't sit in your bank and just think big thoughts. Get out there and engage. I think that's the key.
Okay.
I also think it's a question of relevance. I mean, those who fail to move forward aren't going to survive.
That's right.
And so, you know, bankers have to have this evolution mentality of how we can be better and what are our customer needs. Because at the end of it, this is all about the customer experience. And each bank has their own niche, their own community, their own customers that they want to serve. So what's their purpose? What are their core values? And those need to match up to how they're offering their services.
Oh, can I build on that, Amy?
Sure.
Nimbus is a great platform. Love those guys. They have a great expression saying whatever, which is niche is the new local. Exactly to your point, Amy. They're like, you're not Dion of Sonoma County. You're a 50-plus-year-old guy. You have kids in college. You have a house. You have these needs, right? So it shifts the lens from, oh, I'm in your neighborhood to I'm relevant to your lifestyle, your choices, your financial needs. And I think that niche is the new local. It just hits the spot for me. Exactly what you're saying, Amy.
I think one of the points too is on AI is we have gone from the personal. If you think of personalization, we've been doing this for 15 years. I've personally been in AI for 7 years. What is the word has lost relevance in the world, where people are either doing fight or flight syndrome. They're either overstating, understating what's happening to us in the day-to-day. So we've gone from the personalization journey has been, you know, so it was a demographic to we that was even smaller, zip code that say to it's I. So the expectation has largely been driven, but customers don't understand. To Amy's right about focusing on the customer. And you mentioned the iPhone, but the B2C environment and advancements in AI and adoption have been really fast. So they've hugely influenced the corporate world to the point that customers' expectations are higher than almost where we can meet them. Because the expectation, to Amy's point, is a singular, advancement. The expectation is that you get it instantly. The expectation is that the teller or whoever the bot is at the bank is as smart as Perplexity or ChatGPT or, OpenAI, whatever it is. And I think the other thing that what we're living with right now is the exponential nature of the technology, which some of us have been screaming from the mountaintops for 6 years. I used to say, I'm Noah, I got a boat. Nobody wants to get on my boat. Right? It's like they're all drinking at the bar. It's coming. And now here we are, where it's been the democratization, right? It's equal and accessible. Everybody can access it. It's decentralized and it's demonetized. So it's cheaper and faster. So mid-sized banks and organizations, everybody's point in this call, are poised now to adopt it in ways. Any of us who cut our teeth or have the battle scars from large scale digital transformations. They were ugly. It was long. It was hugely expensive at the big banks. API integration alone took a long time. Now we've got, vibe codes, and we've got smart, seamless data integration. Things have really shifted on multiple levels. So when we say AI, we be really careful what we mean. Do we mean agentic? Do we mean generative? Do we mean machine learning? Do we, what do we mean? Do we mean quant? Like, we have to be educate, so that people, when they use the language in their business or consumer context, they know exactly what they're referencing and the impact that it's making.
Well, yeah, we're coming off stablecoin summer now, right? I was at an event last night at Visa's headquarters, and the number of bankers.
Oh dear, what was it?
The number of bankers who didn't understand stablecoin was shocking, considering how important it is in banking right now.
Okay. So the other thing that I actually sort of building on what you guys were saying is that a lot of times that what stops the mid-size or the community banks is funding. And I know that I've seen this in other services businesses, and where I come from, audit tax advisory, as they needed to transform their business, they actually got PE funding. I went for a financial services conference where there was an investor there saying, I want to go buy community banks and I want to take out all the back end, so that he wanted to sort of consolidate all the operations so that the community banks could then continue to sort of innovate and grow. So provide almost like a platform. So would love to hear sort of your thoughts on that. So Amy, like, is funding to transform the business an issue?
I think it's a little bit of both. So, my bank's never going to compete against the national players when it comes to their own proprietary technology and what they can do. But there are economies of scale if we come together and invest in one place. So, my bank's not going to take PE money to make an investment, but an innovation lab, a banking innovation lab, can take that money, and a few or many community banks can come together, and we can test together and see what's out there and what might be best, or how can we replicate or duplicate something that might be being offered on the national level, in that regard. So
have you looked at Jason Heinrich's Alloy Labs? They do exactly what you just described.
No, that's what I'm referring to. I'm referring to Alloy Labs.
Okay, that is awesome. I think it's great.
And sort of that's what's happening, and that's where you're seeing, banks that we're doing innovations with that. But if it is a core sort of principal technology or something that really makes sense. So for example, we sort of flipped our IT upside down, and it was a significant investment for our bank to make that. That was approved. So, I think it's a little bit of both. It's dialing down that fear, thinking about the possibilities, and getting the board on board. Getting your leadership on board with that these are integral investments that we need to make for the future of our organization. And then if these are sort of, I don't want to say fly by night, or technologies that, hey, we want to experiment with and we want to sort of see what's going on. And Alloy Labs is an exact example of that, where bankers can come together who can innovate, getting feedback from other industries, because, we know us bankers know enough to be, dangerous, but we think we know it all. And we really need to have that consumer perspective of what's out there and what's sort of the latest or the greatest thing.
If I could interject, I am not a fan of PE money. I worked in an organization, shall remain nameless, but they were PE backed. All they do is slash and burn. They don't grow. They don't innovate. I would not recommend PE money. Now, you can get creative with financing, but what I like to propose to banks of all sizes, outsourced R&D. Exactly as Amy's institution has done. Partnerships with fintechs, great way to outsource R&D. You don't have the budget of JP or Wells Fargo or some of these huge banks, but alone you can engage with a fintech on a one-to-one basis, investment or not, and just do, what's called venture clienting. Just become a client of a fintech startup. You'll be amazed at how it changes the mindset inside your bank. Really interesting point to make is that once you're inside the bank And these thoughts and ideas, and the older cats in the bank start to absorb and echo and say these things, it changes the culture, right? And so the more you, and again, I talk about engaging the ecosystem at all levels, a Google, a startup, a VC investor, like all these fintech investors like Bank Tech and Commerce Ventures and all of the NICA partners, they'll engage with bankers. They'd love to hear from bankers engaging with their portfolio companies. That's a great way to get to know the ecosystem, get to know the VCs. You can invest or not. I mean, they want your money, but they don't have to have your money.
I don't know. That makes sense.
I would agree. I think I just want to pick up also on something about proprietary technology and funding, because I think the ecosystem, everything Dion said and everything Amy said, is a powerful way to introduce new into scale. And with this day and age, we've never had less requirement on deep pockets like we used to in the past for infrastructure to introduce new. The other reason is, I think it's really important to remember the big organizations, a lot of the proprietary technology is fear driven. They want to protect their IP, they want to protect their customer data and security. So the reason they do proprietary isn't what people might think. And so it does require a lot of funding. And in the world of going forward is going to be less and less about proprietary individual technology if it can be shared. Nobody needs a proprietary CRM system or an ERP system or personalization system. You can customize now for your own needs at a different level. That used to take a lot of heavy lifting. It doesn't anymore. So I think there's lots of ways to deal with this that would have required deep pockets that don't anymore.
Got it. So now I'm going to ask all of you, because I love to kind of do this, as to let's put on sort of our thinking hats and kind of, so Amy, I'll start with you. I'd love to hear, where do you think, what is banking or community banking going to look like maybe say 4 to 5 years from now? And I know it's hard, so I'm not going in between 3 to 5 years is probably the horizon, especially given how quickly technology is changing. So would love to hear your thoughts on that. Where do you think, because, and I always say this because now firms need to plan almost like, where do we think our industry is going? And then what do we need to do from here to sort of continue to be successful in that? So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. So I think the community banking landscape will be smaller. I think you're going to continue to see more mergers and acquisitions, and those that are the strong will remain. And so I think you're going to see less and less smaller community banks around the country. I know, I'm up in the Northeast, and we are very prevalent with those. I think you're going to see the banking landscape change, and that you're going to see a lot of potential mutual banks go stock. So you're going to see some different funky mergers that might be happening. It'll be interesting to see the regulatory environment and sort of how that may change or not change. The current administration, I think, has been less on when it's come to regulations and especially in the banking areas. And I think it's going to, again, go back to people. And so it's attracting, retaining, and getting, we talk about having these sage advisors, and it's training up those people, getting those people that want to be in the banking industry, who are going to embrace this technology, share this technology, but also be that person, that will have that book of business, who will answer the phone when the customer needs them, who will help them solve that problem. I mean, Dion says, I don't go into a bank unless I have an issue. Well, when you go into the bank, you want to make sure the person that you're dealing with can answer your question. If they have to call somebody, they're getting an answer and they're not getting the runaround. So the customer experience is going to be integral, whether that's using technology, self-service, and I think branches, we didn't really talk a lot about branches today, but there are a lot of bank branches out there. You'll see a lot of the nationals are closing branches, but you'll see that the community environment are growing their branches. And so what do those branches look like? How are they being utilized? How are legacy branches being reinvigorated? Because they might be a lot bigger. Are they partnering with different retailers? Are they partnering with different community groups? Like how is the bank now becoming enmeshed and part of that environment? So I think there's a lot of exciting times. I love going up against the national banks. Sorry, 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶 is the TD, former TD.
I'm with TD. I'm more about village.
I know you're not, but I know that was a past life. But I can make a decision. I can help that customer. I'm going to support them, and they're going to feel really good. I'm going to establish a level of trust with them, and I'm going to have the technology, the rates, and the service to back it up.
Got it. All right.
Well,
So
the danger is not that they leave the bank, right? The danger is that they just put their money elsewhere and keep their bank account. But how important are branches for banks today? I kind of wrote them off, honestly. I'm with Cap One. I don't have a bank branch. It's just not important to me. I realize I might be the outlier. I mean, what's foot traffic in a bank branch now? Is it still going?
It's still going in my world, and that's supporting small business customers who need change, who need money for their customers. An older demographic, but then there's a mix of younger customers who are coming in. And although, Dion, you're not physically going into a branch, I bet you know where your local Capital One is if you needed it. And it's that mindset that I might not need. I pick my bank based maybe on their online and digital capabilities, but I'm probably picking one where I've driven by a branch and I know as a backup, I don't know if I'm going to go in there. I know that I could go in there if I needed to. Or
I actually not. I signed up with ING Direct a million years ago as a digital bank, and they got bought by Cap One. And Cap One, I literally don't have a branch to go to anywhere in California. There are no Cap Ones. But again, I'm willing to accept I'm the outlier, right? And it was a hassle when I bought a house. I wish I did have a branch. So you're spot on. In the moment you need it, it's important. But until then, I didn't care.
All right. So 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶, would love to hear your thoughts on what do you think the bank of the future look like? And I also ask this because I'm sure you must have heard like countries like India and China have moved from like cash economy to like, basically they've all gone mobile. Like that's what you do. And this has been happening across the world. And places like China, they're using facial recognition. So when you go to grocery shopping, you don't need to pay by any kind of.
China and facial recognition is a whole.
But all I'm just trying to say is if more and more retailers are going to start to do that, which means you don't physically need like a card, or you don't. So the whole banking ecosystem in some ways is changing because two of the largest economies are basically gone from like cash to being digital. And so, then what also happens is in places like Starbucks, it's how you pay for it doesn't matter, but they are basically saying you go buy a Starbucks, they own the customer versus, so there's a lot of changes taking. So I'd love to hear, given your sort of hat that, and you've seen transformation, you've been doing this for, 10 plus years.
You're being
like, where do you think what's it going to look like?
And I've been around the world a few times on this topic, but I will say it does come down to the customer. I really think the future is, as humans, we aren't going to change the need for high touch trust. Let's go back to trust, the core trust in customer. What that looks like in the future will evolve. It will evolve in the form of what that touch point is. It could be mobile, it could be chip, it could be integration. I think we need to arm we're going to see a difference in how employees are changed and how organization. I don't think we've addressed the organizational structure to support the future. Human AI integration. I think the secret sauce is going to be the more we integrate what it is to be human with the emerging tech and not be afraid of that will be key to solving points. That branch teller should be armed with every latest technology there is out there and have like a 2-second answer into their back end, the front end, whatever. And the same with the people holding up the core. And I really think as humans, we will always want customer experience. Our expectation is faster, trusted, and on point. I also think the advantage is brand. We haven't really talked about the importance of brand in the future. Trust is eroding among the public on multiple levels. The geopolitical, the tech, the security, am I going to be hacked? Whatever it is, trust is going to be a key component. So the magic intersection for me is trust, what the human connection is, and how we integrate it, technology, so it's one seamless experience for people. And I've been leaning in on AI for a long time, and mostly it's because I like quick, safe, and easy. And I will say the one thing the Village Bank has done now well, which I I'm new to the community here, is they're completely integrated into their community in ways you don't see the big banks do. It's a complete integration. It's not just a brick and mortar store and call it a day. It's immersed, whether it's the chamber or in the bricks and mortars, or whatever it is. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I think we have to be optimistic. And really, I mean, I'm an optimist.
All right, Dion, why don't you put on your thinking cap? And then my last question is going to be about what the bank needs to do from a talent perspective, because you touched on that a little bit, 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶.
So I'm going to go super nerd here, although I'm not actually one. I play one on TV, but the core is going to change. And the way I've seen it work, and Huntington was well on their journey here. You have this outdated core, and they're actually 𝗗𝗶 based, right? It's a Hogan core. It's the oldest, most dated core in the world. And what you do is you lay digital layers on top of it. You hollow the core until the core is so small, it's just a ledger. Then you replace it with a modern blockchain. Now, the problem is you need to interact with the core, but you need layers of APIs, and you need to have devs who know how to integrate, not necessarily build. Too many devs want to build everything. You don't want to build. It's Lego pieces. Just put them together in a different order. So I see the bank of the future hollowing their core, digital layers that can be ripped and replaced, but this requires microservice architecture. You have to change the banks of the future. Too many banks stick with their legacy, outdated architecture, and they need to shift to a microservices architecture so they have the freedom to do the Lego blocks in and out as they see fit. So sorry, nerded it up a bit there, but that to me is the key for a bank of the future, or as a bank moves to the future. And the advantage, all these neobanks, new bank, all these banks that we keep saying skyrocketing numbers, they were able to go from a blank sheet of paper to build their platform, right? There's a great joke at Silicon Valley. How did God build the world in 7 days? He had no installed base, right? It's really easy to innovate on a blank sheet of paper, right? Banks don't have that advantage. They've got to figure out how to take the past and the future, meld them, how to take digital and people and meld them. And that's the banks, much like Amy's bank, that are going to be surviving 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road.
Great. No, that's perfect. So 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶, I just wanted to ask you that question where you said that the bank by itself would need to look different, or the talent within it. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, because Dion's already touched from a technology point of view, what they're going to need to do. Would love to hear your thoughts on this. And then we'll...
Yeah, I think that we are not yet creating roles that would support the future. And the young talent coming in, they're way more trained, they're highly skilled. They shouldn't be the typical entry-level data entry, process engineering, locking up. You remember the days we locked up auditors in a room, but they were brilliant kids, but they quit because they were doing Excel spreadsheets. Right. And the common lowest denominator should be, we need to think of it as role displacement, not replacement, and think about how we can capitalize on the human capital that's coming at us, that is brighter, faster, and quicker than ever before. This is a powerhouse group of humans that are coming into the workforce, and we have tools now that can unlock us. But we don't have an organization to support it, and we don't have a reward or HR structure to support it. So we need to have a way to reward and grow people in uncertainty, and understand that career paths are changing. And how do we retain and grow and nurture talent in the shifting game without losing them? Because there's a place for everybody. I really do think that. And I think having HR at the table, the challenges, the reward structures, and you get people with mortgages and bonuses, and they're kind of used to being rewarded in a certain way. So we have a huge, I work a lot on just lately more and more on the organizational behavior and leadership dynamics to shift to support what's coming at us, because we should not be leaving this talent out in the cold.
Okay, great. So Amy, would you like to sort of wrap up? Because you obviously, I know you've got an HR background too, to kind of, what do you see what's happening within banks from a talent perspective? What are they doing now to nurture their talent to be successful going forward?
Well, I think there's a, in the community bank landscape, that's an attractive place to work. I think in sharing my own career, you can work in all different sort of areas. And I don't necessarily know if people know that, you can work in marketing, human resources, lending. If you like dealing with customers, you can work with the public. So it is really a great place to have a great skill set. I think leveraging local universities, not only for their talent, but also their technology and some of the things that can be there, will be great for the future of banking. I think the future of banking is bright for the banks that are going to be there and are going to exist. But finding that talent, training that talent. And I think to 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶 point, not having sort of those same blinders on that you always have had of this is how we do it. This is how we bring someone through the system. Because I think, the next generation of employee has different expectations and what they're looking for. And I think if you're able to adapt, pivot, and meet new employees, exciting, challenges for banking, in the middle somewhere, I think it's going to be a win-win.
Awesome. So thank you all. This has been such a great discussion. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, 𝗗𝗶𝗴𝗶. Thank you, Dion. Really, really appreciate it. This has been a fantastic conversation, and thank you to our wonderful audience.
Thanks, you.
Everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining Digital Dialogue. Look for more episodes at noon Eastern Time on most Tuesdays of every month. Can't join the live session? You can watch the replay anytime on our YouTube channel.